It's been 27 years since I started working in this industry. I've worked with thousands of salespeople, and the one thing that has always frustrated me is excuses. If you want to be successful in sales, there's only one thing you need to remember, and that is no excuses. In this video, I'm going to share with you my thoughts about no excuses management and how it relates to success in sales. When I was 23 years old, I was selling insurance, and I had an agent that was the most successful agent we ever had. He sold over $1 million of life insurance in a market where no one could sell anything. He did it in a 100-mile radius of our office. The rest of us were out there scratching our heads, wondering what was he doing differently? How was he able to sell so much, and why couldn't we sell anything? It frustrated me because I liked that agent and I wanted him to share his secrets so that I could also become successful. One day I said to him, "Look, you've been doing this longer than me. You're killing me. Why can't I write the business like you?" And he said, "I don't know. You tell me." I said, "Well, what do you think it is that you're doing that I'm not doing?" And he said something that changed my life forever. He said, "No excuses." And I said, "What?" And he said, "No excuses." And then he walked away. I thought, what does that mean? And then I realized what he meant. You see, when he would call on prospects, he wouldn't call on them with a bunch of excuses as to why they should buy from him. He simply said, "Here's what you need to do. This is what your family needs if you pass away. Here's how much it costs. Do we have a deal?" That's it. There was no fluff. There was no excuses. And I realized that every time that I went out and called on somebody or did a sales presentation, I went in with all these things that I had to overcome. So, for example, I'd go in and say, "Well, Mr. Prospect, your son's kind of wild, huh? He's got a lot of speeding tickets, but don't worry, we've got a solution for that." Or I'd go in and say, "Your daughter's going to college, right? That's expensive, but fortunately, we have a plan that will take care of that." And the list goes on. And what I was doing is I was trying to convince myself that those things were important. But what he taught me is that it's more important for me to understand what my prospect S needs are, not try to fit my product into their needs by trying to use these little tricks and tactics. He said, "No excuses. You take what you're reselling and you try to fit it into the needs of the customer, and you don't listen to the customer. You don't ask the customer questions. You just tell them what they need." And I said, "Well, what happens then?" He says, "Then you get the sale." So the next time I went out and saw a salesperson that was excusing themselves into why they needed to buy this product, I stopped listening to them and I said, "Wait a minute, this guy's just making stuff up and he thinks that this stuff is important to me. Why would I buy this?" And so therefore I didn't buy. And so I began to realize that in order to become successful, I had to listen more, talk less, and make sure that I never excused myself into a sale. I made sure that my prospect knew what it was they needed, and then I took the steps necessary to make sure that I could meet their needs. In other words, I stopped talking about features and benefits and all that kind of stuff, and I simply asked them questions about what they really needed. And then I made sure that I delivered that. The second thing that I learned from this experience was that whenever I coach salespeople or manage salespeople, I had to stop listening to their excuses. If they came to me and said, "I went and saw John Smith today and he wasn't interested. His wife died last year, and so he wasn't interested in buying any life insurance." I'd say, "Well, did you ask him if he needed life insurance?" And they say, "Oh, yeah, he said he didn't need any." And I said, "Well, then why would you try to talk him into buying it?" They say, "But I did." And then I say, "Well, then why didn't he buy?" And then they say, "Because I told them about his wife dying." And I said, "Are you kidding me? What do you mean you told them about his wife dying? Why would you bring up something negative? Instead, you should have said, 'Mr. Smith, Are you sure you don't need life insurance? And so I learned that sometimes managers and sales leaders make the mistake of listening to excuses. If you're a salesperson and you're making excuses, you're not going to be successful. If you're a sales leader and you listen to excuses, you're going to have a difficult time managing salespeople. So therefore, I adopted a philosophy of no excuses. At Sales RX, we live and die with the philosophy of no excuses. If our customers have an issue, they call us up. We fix it. We don't make excuses for why it's not our fault. We simply fix it. If one of our employees comes to me and says, I'm having a problem at home. My dog ran away. My car broke down. My kids got arrested. I don't care. We don't accept excuses. All I want to know is, how could I help you solve the problem? Once they tell me how I can help them solve the problem, we work together to solve the problem, but I don't allow excuses. And so if you're struggling with excuses, here's what I suggest you do. No. 1, when you go out and start managing people or start selling, make sure you never make an excuse for why something doesn't get done. Make sure you get it done. If you're a salesperson, make sure you do everything you can to make sure you hit your numbers. And if you come up short, figure out what you did wrong and make sure you correct it. Don't make excuses for it. As a sales leader, make sure you never accept excuses. Make sure you demand results. And if your team members come to you and say, well, this is why it didn't happen, I'm not interested in hearing it. I want to know how we can work together to make sure it happens next time. The second thing is that when you hire, you need to look for people who don't make excuses. Sometimes when you interview people, they tell you all kinds of excuses for why they left their previous company. Maybe their boss was a jerk, or maybe they didn't like the commute or whatever. And you have to be careful about that. Look for people who don't make excuses. Look for people who are winners and look for people who are self-starters. Finally, I would encourage you to read a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It's a great book about being disciplined and not making excuses. It will really help you. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you enjoyed this video and you got value out of it, please subscribe. It really helps my channel and I appreciate it. Also, if you've watched this far, please comment below with the words "no excuses" so I know that you got value and I'll know that you're out there. Thanks again. I appreciate you. Have a great day.